Sorry, I'm a little late with this video. We were one of the first groups to go to the USBC Open Championships at the end of March, so I wanted to provide some intel for everyone. But it has taken me a couple months to get around to starting up this channel. By the way, does it show my age that I still want to call it Nationals? When did it become the Open Championships, or the OC, as people call it now for short? Truth be told, I've never been a fan of Nationals. As a singles tournament player, I like having my entire arsenal available to me. The pace of play with at most 4 on a pair of lanes. Getting 10 to 15 minutes of warm-up and practice, especially since I'm old now, and I need at least 10 shots before I can even throw it normal. But now that I'm older, hopefully a little wiser with a little better perspective, and I've lived a little, I view bowling more for the chance to meet whatever challenge is put in front of me and to spend time with my friends and family in a shared experience. And bowling, no matter what, is an environment that gives me that opportunity. Anyway, back to the lane play at this year's OC at the Reno Stadium. I'll refer to it as the OC to make it easier to say and to symbolize my new perspective on the event. I'm sure there's a theory that as USBC puts down the pattern each and every day for months, it played differently for us at the end of March compared to when you will bowl on it in the coming months. Also, I didn't take any video while we were bowling. I'm going to pull up my stats from PinPal and we'll kind of go frame by frame and look through all of the choices and shots that I made. Again, sorry that there's no video, but hopefully I'll be able to explain it pretty well. We bowled team event Sunday night. I had actually bowled the regional in Grants Pass the same weekend and had made the cut. So I bowled Grants Pass Sunday morning, then drove to Reno to bowl Sunday night. I can't remember a time when I even bowled 2 tournaments in the same day that were 300 miles apart. Also, that created an interesting dynamic where I would have had to have withdrawn from the finals of the regional had I made it in Grants Pass. So stay tuned for a future episode where I talk about the mental aspects of that, on whether I should have even bowled Grants Pass, but since I did, how that affected my thought process during the tournament. But back to the Open Championships. So I bowl with my son, my nephew, and friends as part of a group from our league at Double Decker in Roanoke Park. They're good league bowlers, aside from Alec, Nathan, and Matthew and myself. They don't really bowl a lot of tournaments. So we didn't have a game plan to work together to break down the lanes in a certain way. Many from this group had bowled the Bowler's Journal, so they came to the team event with some intel. The team on my pair had sanded Ion Maxes, and they like to play in the track between 10 and 15. So since Nathan and Alec are two-handers and everyone else was throwing surface stuff in the track, we did burn up a spot in the front part of the lane pretty good in that track area. As it turns out, the track and team event is probably the right place to play, so it was a good accident. The arsenal I took onto the lanes for team were the following 8 bowling balls. The IQ78U, which doubled as a spare ball. More on that later. The Concept, Ion Max, the RST X1, one of the original OGs, the Bionic, the Sublime, which has been really good for me in a lot of tournaments, so I keep it in my bag. The Gremlin Tour X or GTX, IQ Tour AI. My tendency is not to want to jump too far left too soon, so I always worry about a hole that hasn't developed in the middle of the lane on the fresh. So I try to play the structure of the pattern, which is typically with breakpoints around 6, 7, 8. So at the start of team, I did try to play like 10 of the arrows out to about 8 with the Concept to control the lane and try to stay out of trouble early. But after hitting light the first shot, and even after striking on the second shot, I felt like the Concept was just not reading the lane. And it was kind of hydroplaning down the lane. So I decided to ball up to the Ion Max to get the ball to dig into the lane more and go like 11 or 12 with the arrows out to about 8. I missed right with the head pin, then went high. I threw 3 good ones for a triple, but then went high again. And unfortunately, shooting 3-pin combinations wasn't easy. And it isn't easy to begin with. Just ask EJ Tackett. but even harder at the Open Championships because we have hook in the track, making the ball want to go left of the 3-pin if you get it going up the lane. And there's OB to the right. So if you get it going right, it could slide past it. And that was very obvious if you see my results here, where I missed the 3-6 right, and then I chopped the 3-6 off the 3-6-10 the very next frame. So I go straight at spares, but given my limited arsenal for Open Championships, and that's one of the issues where you can really only take what you can carry out in the lane. So 8 balls is pretty much it for me. I went with the IQ 78 for spares rather than my spare ball. It's not a big difference. It's not like the IQ 78 hooks a lot more, but it is just a little bit of friction on the lane, and the ball will hook a little bit more than I'm used to. So maybe I'll blame that for my misses. We won't say anything about the fact I also missed my target, but anyway, shooting spares with that IQ 78 was a little bit of a learning curve for me at the Open Championships. Regardless, after all that, it was a 193 out of the gate, which isn't terrible. I started to throw the Ion Max Game 2, and I just kept inching left, and I just kept getting more and more hook, as you can see. Pretty much every ball was high for the first part of that game. Then, of course, I left another 3-6-10, slid past the 3-pin again, so I had an open. But it became obvious to me that I kept finding more and more hook as I moved left. So at this point, I was just going to have to figure out a way to get steep through the front. And trying to do that with the Ion Max, I felt it was too slow to recover down the lane. And to get as steep as I needed to with that ball through the front part of the lane, it just wasn't going to recover. Essentially, crossing between 10 and 15 at the arrows resulted in just having all this hook to my left. And I was moving into the area that we broke down during practice. And then I had the out of bounds still to my right. Honestly, shouldn't have taken me that long to make a big move. But finally, in the 5th frame of Game 2, I switched to the Gremlin Tour X, or the GTX. And I made a big jump left. And I moved to the other side, the left side of the friction that had developed. The GTX was pretty much fresh out of the box. I had just drilled it and probably thrown about a game or two with it before the Open Championships. Luckily, I made a good guess. I lined up to go about 18 at the arrows and get the ball just to the right of the rangefinder down lane. So essentially, the farthest right point it was getting was hopefully about 8 at about 40-ish feet down the lane. By the way, Brunswick Pro Anvil lanes with the rangefinders are the best. I personally wish all lane beds had those rangefinders on them, since they're so helpful to have markers to gauge the ball position, both distance down the lane and also what board it is across the lane. For me, I often target down the lane, so it actually helps to have an exact target to look at. So I'm a big fan of the Brunswick Pro Anvil lanes, which they have at the Reno Stadium. And that's good news for me, getting back to how I was playing them, because things basically aligned where I was able to play the lanes pretty much in my wheelhouse. I've always felt versatility is an important part of a high-level player. So being able to play multiple angles, meaning both targeting at the arrows from first board to as far left as, or even getting left of 25, as well as multiple launch angles. So being able to go straight up the lane or being able to get really steep and open up the front, swinging it 15, 20 boards through the front part of the lane. That's all really important skills to have. But ultimately, I do think everyone has a preferred target and an angle to play, either because it's where they've had their most reps, like where they grew up bowling or where they bowl league all the time, or it just fits their eye just because that's what they're used to seeing their ball do all the time, or just that alignment and that area of the lane sets up really well with their swing direction and just their physical execution of how their game sets up. For me, as a child of the 80s, growing up with urethane, where the tracks were really dominant, I just grew up floating the track and just kind of circling a little bit around the third arrow out to about 10. And so I find that I'm most comfortable when I can target around the third arrow and float it to like 8, 9, 10. So needless to say, at the team event at the stadium here for the OC, I got really comfortable. I saw my ball do the right thing, and I ended up hitting the pocket every shot the last 15 frames. And it was just a matter of getting the ball to go through the pins right to carry. As you can see in frames 5 through 8 of the third game, my carry angle started to go. I really didn't want to move because I was striking, but the 7-pin, 10-pin, 10-pin, 4-pin on 4 consecutive shots was telling me something. And quite frankly, I was a little slow in listening. Usually the corner pin leaves are either because the ball is saving too much energy, skidding past it and coming in behind the head pin, not getting into the roll phase early enough, or it's the ball reading a little too early, getting into the roll phase a little too soon and getting forward. So the entry angle isn't enough and the ball doesn't drive through the pins. So since I had thrown like 10 of the last 12 without really moving, it was safe to assume my ball was not skidding too far. And I concluded then it was burning up a little bit. Unfortunately, given the limited arsenal I took into the tournament, I didn't really see any other ball in my bag that was going to definitively work better. The only other ball that I thought was cleaner was the IQ Tour AI, but I felt that would potentially be too clean through the front and force me to move right or square up too much. I only had 2 frames left in team event, so I decided to move my feet a couple left with the same ball, hoping that a steeper angle to the front and hopefully finding a little more volume of oil still intact to my left would help to get the ball to float a little easier through the front part of the lane. Now, opening up the angle more and moving a little left, though, did mean that I would need the ball to hook back a little harder down the lane to get it back to the pocket. So now I had to figure out a physical way to throw it to get it to come back from being probably 2 and 1, 3 and 1.5 farther left. I opted to slow my speed down as well. Changing ball speed is another physical tool that I think is useful for players to have in their toolkit. There's many different ways to do it. As you'll find as I talk through these things, everything is kind of personal to you and what works well for you. For me, I change ball speeds by changing the height of my start position and push. So starting with my hands higher results in a bigger pendulum swing and just naturally creates more ball speed and more momentum. Starting with my hands lower will shorten up my swing, make it a shorter pendulum, and will give me less ball speed. So you might ask yourself, does that mess with my timing? I found my timing always ends up pretty much the same no matter what I do. Personally, for me, timing is one of the hardest things to change. So for me, my subconscious just automatically corrects itself to the same timing no matter how I'm bowling over the 40 years I've been doing this. So changing my start position actually works fine for me. And again, my timing just kind of finds itself regardless of how big my swing is and how high my starting position is. So anyway, back to the adjustment, I decided to move a couple left, keep my target at the arrows at the same point, still keep my break point at the same spot at 8, 9, 10 down the lane, and just lower my hands a little bit at the start position to be able to throw a little slower. And I ended up throwing the last 4 to end with 236. So overall, it was a pretty good set, 670, which isn't a ton, but to be honest with you, I don't know how guys average over 260 at the Open Championships. But then again, I've never been a guy who shoots really big scores. I'm more of a kind of slow and steady wins the race guy. So anyway, the 670 felt like it was a jailbreak for me, and I did give away some pins on some missed spares too. So anyway, that's how team finished. We came back the next day, Monday, for doubles and singles. Because of the USBC rule limiting the number of PBA members on a team and not allowing a doubles team to be made up of both PBA members, I couldn't bowl with my son. I got to bowl with Matthew, who's a lifelong friend and has a crazy number of Open Championships under his belt. I think he's got more than 20 years. I know they announced him at our squad check-in, so it's a really cool thing that he keeps coming back every year and year. And since I was coming from the regional, I did have my whole arsenal in the car. So I decided to switch out a couple balls, and I took out the Concept, and I also took out the IQ Tour AI. I felt the Concept just really wasn't reading the lane for me. If I was ever going to throw it, it was only going to be for a few frames, and it just didn't seem to make sense to take up a spot in my bag for kind of a niche ball like that. And then same for the IQ Tour. I just felt like IQ Tour AI. I just felt like it was too clean. While we were bowling 6 games, there's fewer people on the pair, so I didn't think we were going to break them down as quickly. And I just never even got to it in team. So I just felt like I could replace it with something, and I didn't need a really weak ball in my bag. So I ended up putting in an Origin, the original Origin. That one I drilled with a kind of unusual layout for me. It's a pretty weak, tall pin, 5 3/4 by 3, pretty strong PSA by 2 pin buffer. And really what that does for me is it gives me kind of that hook stop shape. And I also find that 900 Global tends to get forward for me in general, just as a ball company. So that shape is really different from what I typically look for, which is kind of that rounded and continuous motion. So having that ball in my bag just to give me a different shape, I thought was going to be important. And I also threw an RST X2 in my bag, which is also another OG one. That I actually told Steve Klomkin when I crossed next to him at a regional that they should bring that one back because that ball has been really good for me. And it rolls great. So I decided to replace the IQ Tour AI with that one just to give me another weaker ball, but was, stronger, has a stronger core, being asymmetrical, that would probably have a chance of playing at the end of the block for doubles and singles. So there's 6 in a pair, as I mentioned. We didn't really have a breakdown strategy. So we were kind of in the same boat that I was for team, where it's just kind of figure out where the best place to play was. Initially in practice, I could just feel like they were longer and tighter. That was just the feel that I got. I wish that USBC actually posted the patterns. I'm not entirely sure why they don't, when you're asking people to potentially fly with a limited number of bowling balls. To just go in blind is kind of tough. Maybe that's part of the challenge. I don't know. But anyway, it felt, doubles and singles definitely felt longer and tighter. I started again trying to play like 10-8, but this time I did it with the Origin, so I could keep it online more with that kind of hook stop shape, and it wouldn't be so continuous down the lane that it would force me to open up too much. I hit the pocket the first 3 shots, but only carried once. Then I left a solid 9 in the 3rd frame, and I could just feel that it wasn't the right thing exactly, the right angle to be playing. So I decided to move left and experiment with a strike shot while I shot the spare. And normally that's a strategy you can employ to get some intel when shooting a single pin that's in the middle of the lane, whether that's the 2 pin, the 3 pin, the 5 pin, the 8 or the 9. You can shoot it off your strike line essentially and try a different ball or angle if you want to experiment. So it is, again, a good strategy. But in retrospect, as I mentioned earlier, with the Open Championship pattern where we're playing without a lot of built up hold on the fresh and the out of bounds to the right, it probably wasn't a good idea to hook at it, because essentially I was, maximizing my misses, because if I got it going up the lane, I hook by it. And if I tried to swing it out to the right, then it would hit the OB and potentially miss it and slide past it. And of course, I did the former. I got it going up the lane a little bit and it hooked by it and I missed it. Although that did give me some intel. I knew that, again, like team event, the more I moved left, it felt like there was more and more hook. Might have just been because they were still fresh and so the hold hadn't developed. But either way, I decided to make a big jump left, still with the Origin, and go like 15-10. I didn't hit the pocket, but I did leave a 10 pin. And I was probably still dwelling on my last 2 errant shots, so I missed it. And that, speaking of mental game, that's kind of where the demons pop into your head, because now you've got all those thoughts racing through it, which is, oh, if I shoot 170, I'm going to get out of all my forward brackets, and I'm lost, and I don't know how I'm going to bail this game out, etc., etc. So remember, I said in a previous episode, you're going to hear things from me about the mental game and probably things not to do. Well, that's definitely not something that should be going through your head as you're bowling. Instead, this focus should really be moment to moment. Stay focused in that shot, stay committed to your next adjustment, and just make a good shot. The context of score and outcome and results should not impact your next shot. But that's easier said than done, as we all know. What followed that first game was just a battle to find something. I felt I was in the right area of the lane with the only ball that could control the pocket, that origin. So I just tried to roll it forward so I could get it to be controllable. And as you can see, it took me a couple shots to get my release down right because I don't typically roll it forward much. But I was able to muster a four bagger, especially with the help of a well-timed Brooklyn at the end of that four bagger, and I bailed out a 203. Ultimately, either the lanes were changing really fast or it was just smoke and mirrors that I hit the pocket for 6 of 8 shots with that origin. But in the middle of game two, I just completely lost my ball reaction. I tried the RSTX1 and then the Gremlin Tour X since it worked the day before. That's another thought that typically runs through people's heads is, hey, this ball worked last time, so I should try it again, even though it's a different pattern and a different day. But since I felt like the pattern was playing longer, and typically my philosophy on longer patterns is that you should play closer to the head pin. And that's because the ball just will not cover a lot of boards down lane. So you can't get the ball right of like 10 and hope that it's going to hook back 7 or more boards in the last third of the lane. So in those longer patterns, typically what you want to do is move everything left and get closer to the head pin. So the ball is not having to cover so many boards, and you really don't want the ball to get any further right than like 12 or 13. You still want to use angle through the front. So you want to get your ball going left to right. So you're going to have to move in deep left of that fourth arrow probably. And by getting the ball left to right off your hand, it's got a chance to hold because it's still fading to the right. And that's kind of how a lot of people play what's called fallback. Or if you've ever heard someone say they're trying not to give away the 3-pin, that's exactly what they mean. They mean play a line where the ball doesn't really get outside of that 3-pin. So it basically isn't getting that far right of like 13, 14. So that's what I decided to do. I took the GTX, I finished game two, and I was trying to hit like 23 at the arrows and get it no farther right than 14. So it's basically trapping it right in the pocket. And I doubled on 10 for a 174. So, and of course I had 2 more missed spares in there, both 3-pin combinations. And that contributed to my lower scores. The 3, 6, 9, 10 is already one of the most difficult non-splits to convert. But I would say on that pattern, it might be almost impossible, especially if you're going to have any hook at it, because again, you get it going right, it's going to slide past it, and you get it going up the lane, it's going to chop it or miss left. So through 5 games, I had missed 6 makeables, I believe. 5 of them were 3-pin combinations. And of course that 10-pin where I just had the mental lapse. So I will say making the 3-pin combinations is a huge way to improve your score, especially on tournament patterns, because you're going to leave that a lot. So maybe that's a food for thought for one of my future episodes that we'll talk about strategies on how to shoot 3-pin combination spares. But getting back again to the scores and my performance at the Open Championships, I grinded through game 3 of doubles, still trying to play fallback. I even made the 3-6-10 in that game, although I made it on the left. And I shot 204. On the 11th frame, I left a 10-pin. So I decided that I wanted to just have an alternate game plan because I still really wasn't loving what my ball was doing from the deep inside line. I hadn't thrown any balls the entire tournament out around the first arrow. So I grabbed my IQ 78U and threw it basically right up the first arrow just to see what the ball would do. Would it just hydroplane and go dead straight? Would it actually read and have a little hook? Would it hit the lane and overhook, which would be unlikely, but you might see that on a house pattern. But again, I just wanted to get some intel and just kind of save that away for later. So that's why I have a miss of the 10-pin in that on that last shot of that game. I guess it was the last game of doubles, so game 6 of the tournament. So then singles started. And again, I still didn't really love the GTX. It wasn't really giving me any room for error. And I saw that Matthew in doubles, who I was bowling with, had a pretty good look. And he was going straight around the third arrow, maybe just trapping it at like 13 at the break point, trying to hit like 15 at the arrows. And he just was going basically right at the 3-pin. So I thought maybe the track had developed a little bit and I could just go with a straighter angle, move back to the right and just do what he was doing. There's only 6 in a pair. We didn't have Nathan or Alec, who are both two-handers, and so they didn't really beat up that middle part of the lane. So I just thought I could probably play straighter than I did the day before. So in frame 4 of game 4, I switched to the RST X2 and tried to play basically where Matthew was, again, about 15, 16 at the arrows, out to about 13. I hit the pocket 4 shots in a row. I threw a 3-bagger, then left a 10-pin. And then all of a sudden, the ball just stopped hooking. As you can see from what I had, I went washout, and then I left the 2-5, and I missed the 2-pin and only took out the 5-pin. Then I missed the head pin. So I ended up shooting 178. And at the same time, Matthew was also starting to have his ball not hook, and he was hitting light. So at that point, my conclusion was that we had probably carried some oil down the lane, kind of in front of the pocket, maybe like at 12 to 15, and they just got super tight right in front of the pocket from the track area. So I kind of exhausted all ideas of how to play the middle part of the lane, anywhere from fallback 5th arrow to straight in the track and anywhere in between. And so I just concluded the middle of the lane was unplayable. So there was no room for error there. And I just kind of punted, and I just said, forget it. I'm just going to try to play as straight as possible, throw the IQ 78, leave makeables, make my spares, and just try to catch a double here and there and shoot some 2-0s and just get out of there. With that IQ 78, I've found that with my rev rate, I just don't strike a lot when I get in away from the gutter. So if I'm at the second arrow or even deeper, I just don't really strike very much with it. So that ball is great for high rev players and two-handers, but for me, it just doesn't create enough entry angle. So the only way I can do it is to move really far to the right and play out as far as possible and create entry angle just from the ball coming in from right to left from my alignment. What followed was pretty unexpected, to tell you the truth. But I was able to throw enough strikes to finish 243, 217. I was trying to play straight up 3-4. I felt like I had a little room to the left. If I hit 4, it laid there. If I hit 3 and even out to 2.5, it would have a chance to hit light and strike. So for me, playing the gutter or close to the gutter, that was kind of my best option. And really, I accomplished that goal that I had put out there when I grabbed that red ball, the 78U, of hitting the pocket most shots, staying out of trouble. I didn't split again, as you can see. And again, the good news was I carried enough to end the tournament in singles with 638. So 9-game total of 1889 or 89 over. That's pretty good given the ball reactions that I had and some of the decisions I made, especially in doubles where I clearly should never have tried to play the middle part of the lane. And I kind of gave away 4 games doing that. Again, here's my Pin Pal stats for the entire tournament. I missed 5 3-pin combinations. I also missed the 2-5. So, basically that cost me 80 pins and spares. I also missed a couple single pins. So if I make all those makeables, I'm probably 160, 170 over. Pretty good tournament. Still, all said and done, not too upset about being 90 over and pretty happy with how I bowled. Just physically, just some mental errors and some spare shooting and some poor lane play choices that cost me. On a side note, I will say Pin Pal is what I use for a lot of these tracking of stats. It's a pretty good app. It's a one-time purchase, so it's pretty cheap. The couple things it doesn't do is it doesn't track like pocket hits with strikes to figure out your actual carry percentage. And also the one thing that's just for me a little bit of a pet peeve, because I often will throw a fill ball where I left a single pin and try to get some intel like I did in, I think that was game, 4 or 3 of the singles and doubles. It counts as a missed single pin, but I clearly was not trying to shoot the spare. So that part, it would be nice if they had some way to get the score right, but not count it as a missed single pin. I haven't tried Lane Talk, or at least the paid version of Lane Talk. My guess is it's probably got more features, but if you're interested in any of those type of apps, you can check those out. They are helpful to kind of see some trends and see some things that you can work on, whether it's a commonly missed spare or commonly left spare, so that you can figure out maybe areas to improve your game. So here is my overall recap from the Open Championships. Overall, the lanes are fairly playable. I mean, it's a sport pattern, so it's not like they're going to be easy, but they definitely were playable. I didn't bowl Baton Rouge last year, so I can't compare to that. But there's always similar characteristics at every Open Championship. In Reno, for team, there's a little more friction. There's a distinct out of bounds. So don't try to break down the outside part of the lane. I don't think that's a good play. Interestingly, I just watched the Beef and Barnsey podcast where they had Mike Jasnow on, and maybe it's confirmation bias, but he basically said the same things that I'm saying I'm about to say. But for team, yeah, again, more friction. So you can play in, I'd say in the middle of game one of team event, it definitely breaks down and you can get inside the track. And you want to open up your angles a little bit, because if you go up the lane, there's no hold. So the ball's going to, hook if you play too straight. But if you open up your angles a little bit, get your break point to 7, 8, 9, there's definitely a little bit of area there, and you can get to the pocket whether you hit 7, 8, or 9. So a little miss room left and a little miss room right. For doubles and singles, they definitely were tighter, and I felt like you really had to be much farther right. You could probably use something that's, got your ball to read a little earlier, whether that's urethane or surface on a reactive. But again, probably the key is to make sure that you slide far enough right, keeping your angle straighter. I was sliding around 10, again, looking at 3, 4, and that may be uncomfortable for many of you. But if you really want to have success at tournaments, and especially the Open Championships, I would advise you learn how to play out and play straight and play closer to the gutter. That's definitely a tool you should have in your tool bag. And of course, spares are always important. Be aware of the fact, again, that there really isn't a lot of hold in the middle of the lane, and there's out of bounds to your right. For those of you who are used to bowling on house patterns, you get a little bit of help that if you miss left, the ball will hold there, and if you miss right, it will hook back. But when you go to these tournaments and tournament patterns, sport patterns, and especially the Open Championships, you're going to run into the situation where the pattern actually accentuates your mistakes. So if you miss right, the ball can hit the out of bounds and skid past it. And if you get the ball going at the pin up the lane, it's going to read that friction and have no hold, and the ball could hook by it. So I saw a lot of guys on our pairs who just quite frankly aren't used to shooting spares in this environment, and they would miss a lot going right when they got it going right and slide by. And then as soon as they tried to go at the pin, it would hook past it. So again, just remember that spare shooting is a premium. And really, if you're going to bowl these types of tournaments, I would advise you to learn how to throw it straight, or at least as straight as possible, as accurately as possible, so that the pattern doesn't affect your ball. And so that you have that ability just to know what the ball is going to do. If I hit my target, it's going to make it and not be impacted by how the pattern plays. So again, hope you enjoyed watching. I hope you find this helpful. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, bowl up a storm.